All right. Hello, y'all. Thank you so much. You know, I'm always here but let me cut this off so that this is not bothering that. How is everybody doing today? If you don't mind, if you can come up off, we got to raise the vibration, because here's the thing about doing this Zoom land, right? We out here in the house, we by ourselves. If we could all just quickly come up off of the mic and just make some noise. I don't care what you say. I'm gonna put the music up. Okay, you ain't got to say much. It could just be a little holler. It could be whatever. It could be some noise. But can we make a collective?
Howdy, folks. Howdy.
Yes. Can we make a next one?
Very good to be here.
Good evening, everyone.
Yes. We are here today. All right, thank y'all so much. So we have a lovely presentation for you all today, based on EPR, and I will let these gentlemen speak a little bit more because they are the experts here in this space. But just for those of you who may be new or joining, Cecil, nice to see your name. We've missed you. So this presentation should be near and dear to you, especially as it relates to water quality. So we have Neil, who is representing ILSR, and Maurice, who is representing Clean Water. And they are going to speak to us today about the Extended Producer Responsibility Bill that we've been talking about for the past year as a SWAB. So I will let you all take it away. We will be in the chat if you need anything from me. Do you have a presentation to share?
Maurice and I each have related presentations of about
Excellent.
5 or 6 minutes each.
Beautiful, beautiful. So you have the capacity to share now. Hold on, let me see. Let me give to.
I don't have any PowerPoints. I'm very old. I'm very old fashioned.
Come on, old school. That's good. That's good for us too.
And
I'm only a little less. I'm just a little less fashioned than Neil. So.
And I hope you folks in the Bronx can understand my Brooklyn accent.
I think we're good.
Hi, everyone.
Okay. Hi, Erica. Awesome. So I see some folks giving some introductions in the chat. Yeah. So you gentlemen, feel free to take away. I had let them know that, you know, this would be a good opportunity to kind of inform us as a SWAB. We'll put this up on our YouTube just so that some folks can see it afterwards and kind of be a part of the convo even more. And as we work to get you all like fact sheets and kind of one-pagers and videos, we'll still, you know, we'll get into all of that later. But tonight will be really, really great to have these gentlemen here to kind of inform us. And excuse me, just full transparency, I am a grad student studying at the new school, and my first class started tonight, and I did not realize it was an overbooking. And so there's my professors like in the background over there. So I'm gonna be here, but I'm doing a little bit of multitasking in full transparency. But yes, thank you so much, Maurice, for putting your bio in the chat. But yes, gentlemen, please take it away. Let us know what EPR is. Why should we care? And what is it going to do for our lives? How does this affect us as consumers, and in particular as Bronx residents?
Okay, first of all, as we all know, it's complex. We will present it as clearly as we can. We have a lot of backup documents, which I'll forward to you or put in the chat. And let me just say by way of introduction, Maurice and I go back a long way. We've been co-conspirators on many, many projects. And it's always great to be with him. He's out of Philadelphia. I'm out of Washington, D.C. I work for the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. I'm their garbage expert, actually recycling and developing recycling into wealth for communities and cities. You could check us out at ilsr.org/recycle. And there are many articles on these issues. And I will post some of them in the chat after I finish my 5 or 6 minutes. So I've been looking into this for several years. Extended producer responsibility is an interesting, innovative policy introduced in Europe maybe 20, 25 years ago. It was originally conceived as a polluter pays principle, meaning Coca-Cola, Pepsi, whatever, they making these things, they're on our streets. It costs a lot of money to recycle or send their stuff to incinerators or landfills. They should pay for the public's inconvenience and cost. However, in recent years, in the United States only, not in Europe, this concept has been turned into a polluter controls. In other words, instead of me paying taxes to the federal government for police protection, I'm saying I'm going to keep the money and I'm going to hire my private guards, and I don't need the community. I don't need any social contract. And that is the difference between two forms of EPR. One that gives total corporate control to the producers. This is in place in British Columbia, Canada. The other is an EPR in which the companies are taxed for the costs they're causing us, but they don't keep the money. The money goes to government, the state, county, city government, and that allows local decision making to happen, which is good because organized citizens and organized small businesses have been the leaders of recycling for the last 30 or 40 years. All these bills on bags and banned styrofoam all come from the grassroots. They move up and finally they become state legislation. That's the way recycling works and has worked for 50 years. What EPR for corporate control means is that all goes away. Citizens no longer have any decision-making power in the decisions that are made by their city, county, borough, etc. And all those decisions become policy decisions made by the Fortune 500 companies, but those policy decisions have the force of law because local government has abdicated its right to make those decisions. You can imagine that this is very, very serious. I don't know any other pollution program in which the polluters are allowed to figure out how to solve their problems. In fact, we do know that the plastic and oil companies have done just the opposite. They've used all the money, all their profits to misinform us, lead us in the wrong direction, claim that climate warming isn't happening, etc. And Maurice and I see this EPR, I'm going to call it a delusion because the clever lobbying of big corporations have figured out that we're facing a plastic crisis, which is real, and a climate warming crisis, which is real. And they are trying to get out of being the bad guys, which they are, by creating a very confusing system that brings in glass, paper, etc. And let me tell you how silly this is. Right now, paper and metal are being recycled in this country at about 65, 70%. It's pretty good. It can get better, but it's real good. Glass is at 35, but glass could be 90 if cities could and companies, the big waste companies, would process their glass so it could be used in industry. They don't. It goes into landfills. And glass is 20 to 25% of our recycle stream, which is being sacrificed. That's critical. For every 100,000 tons of glass that's recycled, 2,500 jobs are created in the bottle making industry, the insulation industry, abrasive industry, and construction industry. Without that glass, those industries, they don't have work, they can't afford the workers, and the profits diminish. All of this is because big business is entering into the local practice of waste management and recycling. And this happened the last time the big business took over recycling. That happened in 2005. From 1970 to 2005, recycling was drop off and municipal collection. And we got this country moved from 5% in 1969 to 35% recycling in 2005, roughly 35 years. That's when big business, waste management, et cetera, took over. And we've held steady at 35% for 17 years. Actually, we dropped because their system was so sloppy, we couldn't sell stuff to China. We fell down to 32%. We're coming up now, mainly because of composting and other things, which if I have time, I'll go over. The bottom line is, if you want to get rid of plastic, tax it. California is doing that. Texas is doing that. There's a federal law called Reduce, which is a 20% surcharge of tax on virgin plastic going into single-use systems. This is how you get rid of plastic, not by tying it into glass, paper, and metal and diffusing it and trying to make believe plastic is not the problem, when in fact plastic is the main problem. And we got to get rid of it. And I use a little formula. If you don't like it, tax it. If you like it, invest in it. If it's dangerous, ban it. And mainly, and also for all three of the above, vote for people who believe, for candidates who are pushing zero waste and local economic development. Now, I could go into many more details. I'll just end with this because I don't want to take too long, because dialogue is more important here than presentations. And that is the New York bill that is in front of us now is a terrible bill. It gives all power to the corporations. They tax themselves, but they determine who gets the money, what city, what county, what company gets the money. And they create what we call crony capitalism. You play along and you do business. You don't like us, you're out of business. And that's exactly what's happening in British Columbia. And let me say, I'll end with this concept. I look at these bills, they're trying to revise them, but they all remind me of two things. One, Charles Dickens' Department of Circumlocution, a bureaucracy whose only purpose is to delay, defray, confuse, and stagnate. It's in Little Dart. It's a hilarious chapter. The other thing that I get reminded of is the Soviet economy. And I need to take it aside here and say, before I got involved in recycling, I was a trained Kremlinologist. That is a person who studied the esoteric communications going on within the Soviet Union so that we can figure out what they're doing, et cetera. Sort of, I wasn't a spy, I was an analyst. And I learned a whole deal about the Soviet economy. And here's a joke from the Soviet economy. They didn't want to believe in markets. They just told people what to do. So you were an industrial manager and you had to produce 50 tons of nails. And they give you the labor power, they give you the coal for energy and the raw materials. And the industrial manager figures out the easiest thing I could do is to create one nail that weighs 50 tons and I'll reach my quota. And he reaches his quota and he gets promoted. Okay, that's the joke, but there's a reality behind it. Solzhenitsyn was a slave laborer in Moscow during the 30s and 40s mostly. And he built these units. And he would never go into them because he knew how shoddy they were built. And he would never, if he was in one, would stand under a chandelier because the chandelier industrial manager made his things heavy so he could reach his quota. So it's dangerous to stand under a chandelier in these shacks. And that's what happens when you create a non-market economy and the centralized dictatorial, I call it authoritarian capitalism. That's what you have in British Columbia. You could read the results, although the pro-EPR people refuse to admit it, but the British PROs are undermining the bottle bill, which is precious in New York. I don't have to explain why that's important. So I will end there by saying there are so many good ways to get to where you want to go. There are EPR bills coming out of Hawaii, Oregon, that keep inclusivity, keep local control, and yet tax the producers of pollution. You don't have to give away your birthright of voting to get good recycling in New York State. If you have EPR, you need public reimbursement. You don't even need EPR. Look at the American Recycling Infrastructure Plan, follow that plan, use the federal money coming down, and you will not need EPR. Einstein said, a smart man solves a problem, a genius avoids a problem. PROs are problems, avoid them.
Thanks for so much for that, Neil. Very much. I think that was one of the reasons why I had sent you the CCIA, because that was my question, and how does EPR contrast with the CCIA, considering that we're saying that yes, the polluters do need to be taxed, but it needs to be controlled by the community. Victor, you had your hand raised. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you so much for that story. I think it's I think Russian history is fascinating because it's kind of like what happens when you have the other half of an extreme, when you don't have a balance between social capacity and people's ability to work for themselves, like balance between economic altruism and economic selfishness that helps feed each other. So I just love hearing about that, and might want to take your email down at some point for future conversations about Russia. But
I look forward to it. We could also talk about the Bronx.
phenomenal. But I've been working for about 2 years trying to help pass the CCIA, which is a climate bill that's trying to tax polluters as well. And what I've been seeing as the most difficult issues within this movement in general is that you're right, like taxes, you're supposed to use that to remove what you don't want. You're supposed to put subsidies towards what you do want, but how that plays out in reality is often different because of a lot of corruptive forces. When you have a narrative where people who have access to a massive, well-trained PR system putting out propaganda against these initiatives, are there strategies that you have in mind currently to try to help combat those narratives? And is there a general strategy is there a offense for defense strategy here for these ideas, and how do they end up playing out? Have you had successes with them? And if you don't have anything in that regard, where are you looking potentially to find those solutions?
Great questions, Victor. Thank you. I'll try to be brief. I believe that let's call them the zero waste EPR people are winning. We call ourselves zero waste skeptics, which doesn't mean we're against it, but we want to kick the tires and show that it works. And so far we haven't seen it. There are excellent bills coming up from the grassroots. I'll point to Hawaii. They just defeated a bad EPR bill, which you're facing, and they're putting together with Senator Laura Ocasio, state senator, and Recycle Hawaii and other good groups. They're putting together an EPR bill that doesn't have a PRO. Tax go directly to government. There are criteria, zero waste criteria for how the government can release that money to cities and towns. For example, in the bill, it says a town can't get, let's say, $100,000 for a compost plant unless it shows that the compost plant is needed and how they're going to do it. They have to show that they know what they're doing. So in other words, there's quality of zero waste quality control embedded in that EPR law. They also have a very unique concept. After the infrastructure is built, let's say 5 years of paying these fees, the EPR situation goes away. There's no more fee. The reasoning is that the corporations will pay for the basic infrastructure, the compost plants, the mini MRFs, the dual stream, the new trucks that are needed for recycling, composting, and reuse infrastructure. And after that infrastructure capital is invested, then we go back to cities paying the annual operations. And it seems to be a very fair balance. Obviously, there's a lot of discussions that have to have. I think where we've turned the tide in that the other side cannot get away with saying British Columbia is nirvana. It's not, and they won't admit it, but the public knows it now. We also have a tremendous advantage because we're being proactive, as you say, Victor, offensive, which is, I believe, the right thing. We're not only criticizing EPR and saying there are better ways to do it, but we're working with Zero Waste USA, with National Recycling Coalition. We put together the American Recycling Infrastructure Plan, which is a $16 billion 10-year investment on how we can relocalize recycling and build up the capacity in rural areas, urban neighborhoods, et cetera. And at the same time, we have a campaign going on. We call it the Recycling is Infrastructure 2, RIIT. And what we're doing, we have monthly webinars. I just finished one. My colleague Brenda Platt is doing one that will be going on for months. We will continue these once a month, in which we're bringing top experts both in technology and policy, and where we have these webinars focused only for elected officials, agency staffers, and organized citizens and small businesses. And for example, the one I did a week ago, was we had the metal industry, the organics industry, paper, reuse, and plastic. And they all had 7 or 8 minutes, and they said, this is our industry, This is what the infrastructure we need. This is how we think we can go about it. And now we're working with Urban Ore and Dan Knapp. We're going to have a series starting in probably May of small business, small recycling and composting business needs, their investment needs. Brenda Platma, as I said, my colleague is doing one this in February, early February, on state surcharges, how states can put a waste surcharge on their landfills and incinerators, collect a fee, and then use that fee for recycling zero waste investment. So there's a lot of good offensive things, offensive in the best moving forward sense, that's happening from strange places like Texas. We're getting excellent laws. They want to put a premium, an advanced purchase price on hard to recycle plastics. And then when you bring them back to recycle, you get your money back. Very creative ideas. I must say that the EPR movement has really, we're opposed to the way they're doing it, but it really has started people thinking of who is responsible. And we know the industry is responsible. We know that petroleum, plastic complex are liars and cheats and selling us down the river for, et cetera. We can't give them more power. We have to tax them and take away power. So we have a defensive and offensive strategy.
Mm-hmm. I do want to just follow up on that with one quick thing, just because it's related. When like that's phenomenal. First of all, I'm really happy to hear that there's like a good offensive, like we're going to inform folks as we're doing this. But I do have, so once, because those are like public conversations, you're trying to like inform folks, get the community on board, things to that extent. When you're dealing with individuals within the actual, like, because this is, I'm assuming you're talking at a federal level with this plan, right? Because you're mentioning rural areas and urban areas. Is this just
yeah,
New York State?
But the EPR is happening at the state and federal level, yes.
Okay, so once you get to the parts of this kind of argument and conversation where you are having like one-to-one conversations with elected officials, what I have found a lot within a lot of environmental legislation, whether it's the CLCPA, which did pass but heavily gutted, or the CCIA that's currently trying to get passed, is that there's a lot of strange trepidation coming from legislators who are afraid of upsetting business, essentially. And they will hide behind that to try to prevent, not necessarily saying no, but why they can't be the first on board. They kind of present it like, I'm not going to be the first lemming off the cliff. So when you're dealing with that kind of narrative, what do you see as a good strategy to overcome that?
I think we have to work with our business community, small businesses. If you're not familiar with the Institute's work, recycling and composting is just one of several. We have a tremendous anti-monopoly independent business and finance program. And we have organized bookstores and pharmacies and funeral homes to make sure that the small business is represented. And if you go, as we do to DC government all the time, to get what we want for the community, we say, don't listen to the big businesses who want to suck money out of our city. Listen to the small businesses who live and pay taxes and send their kids to school in the city. So business is not one unit. The market economy, small business, these are things, these are good, these are our friends. As we know, a lot of small businesses don't vote the right way. Well, we gotta show them that we're the better bet for their future. And we do a lot of organizing in the small business sectors. So that's one response. And for folks, please just go to our webpage. We have programs in business and broadband and energy, all showing that decentralized approaches are better for the community, more jobs, more social justice, and of course, less climate impact. We probably should let Maurice talk to us, if that's okay. I'm not in charge here, but I see Maurice is ready to go.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Neil, and thank you guys for inviting me tonight. I wasn't sure what I was getting into, but I knew whatever it was, I was going to bring Neil with me. We have been doing this for a long time. When I was in the city of Newark, I hired Neil to help us look at recycling as an economic development engine. And then in his travels back and forth between DC and Newark, he stopped off in Philadelphia and set me up for my job there. So we've been playing a game for a very long time in terms of trying to make this work. You know, first of all, I just want to say that this bill that you have is the most complicated bill I have ever seen on this subject. I mean, just trying to understand and comprehend it, and I think I know the subject, having a hard time relating to what I'm reading to what the concept is. And the concept of EPR, extended product responsibility, the terms make sense. The methodology that they're talking about, and I think Neil has done a great job of laying that out. It's based on, if I can say, what were the good intentions in this? The good intentions were, oh my God, dealing with waste recycling is so hard that why don't we take that responsibility off of the weight of the city and people doing it. We'll put it on the corporations and we'll make them handle everything. These are people who are not in this business, who don't understand anything about it. And what we're talking about doing is handing them a multi-billion-dollar industry that is mostly small. There are very large companies, but truth of the matter is, it is mostly small players. And it's really very local. The ability to collect trash efficiently and to collect recycling efficiently is really based on understanding how the people are and how waste works where you live. There is no one size that fits all. Heck, in Philadelphia, when I started the program here, and I started a pilot program, it was 1/30th the size of the city. It was the largest program in the state of Pennsylvania. As a public official, everybody wanted to know why I couldn't make it grow faster. People don't comprehend this subject and this subject matter. But I think where the intentions for some were good, a lot of people on the corporate side don't want this either. They're not in the business of garbage. They're not in the business of trash. They want to sell products and they want to take the cost of dealing with their packaging and let you handle it. You know, when I was in Newark, it was right when the bottle bill legislation was happening in New York. There were a small handful of us. We were the first group of recycling coordinators in the country. As we were trying to understand what you had to do to have a municipal recycling program, most of the environmentalists at the time actually thought that recycling was not a good way to go. And the way we needed to do it was pass bottle bills. And when we looked at bottle bills and when I studied them, one of the things I came to understand, if you go back to the time when we had returnable bottles and milk was delivered at home, and this was back in 1960, where this all began. It actually began with the very first Super Bowl. And Anheuser-Busch, which was a local company in St. Louis, wanted to sell its beer all over the country. Well, at the time, there were nothing but local breweries everywhere. And in this area, it was the Kruger Brewery, which was actually in Newark, and its market was New York. And it was getting its water from, in this case, the watershed. So they had the best water. They were making some of the best beer, but it was local to New York. And because New York is so large, it was a large company. In fact, it was the only other company as large at the time as Anheuser was. But Augie Busch had the idea that he wanted to sell his beer everywhere. And so the problem was that in those days, all the distribution was local. You wanted to get your bottle back to refill it because that was the least expensive way to provide the product. But if you're going to sell beer in St. Louis, you're going to sell it all over the country. You can't bring your bottle back. The cost to bring it back would just be too exorbitant. So what he did was he incorporated the price of the bottle into the beer and advertised in the Super Bowl. People saw this beer advertised in Super Bowl and figured it must be better beer than I'm drinking. And it destroyed the local breweries all over the country. There were lots and lots and lots of local breweries all over the country at the time. Well, after the beer company did it, the soda companies followed. Coca-Cola and Pepsi, they just followed the same model. Well, between those two companies, that represented most of the containers used for all food anywhere. All the beer and all the soda was more containers than all the beer generally. In fact, at one point, Anheuser alone was making more containers than every other food container out there. So as time passed and you started to change the system of distribution of products, it became other products sort of matched that. We went away from local, we got regional, we got national, and we shipped these products away and we charged the customers the cost of the packaging. And then at some point, we realized it would be more efficient rather than delivering directly to the stores to send it to warehouses and then from the warehouses to everybody. So that return loop of how we dealt with our products, it got lost as time went on. And we developed a system where we sell you things, we sell you the package, and in fact, we package that into packaging because we know if it's more colorful and more attractive, you're more likely to buy our product. But I'm going to charge this all to you. And we watched our waste go from being virtually nothing in the 50s to completely out of the control by the end of the 60s. We needed landfills because we didn't have a place to put it. We had an energy crisis, so we started to justify if we can burn and make energy, and that was one way of thinking about it. So we put in incineration. And all along the way, I want you to know, every step of the way, in terms of dealing with this problem, the environmentalists were in favor of this. Now, how do I know this? I know this because I've been involved in environment since 1969. Me and Greta both started at age 15. And I have watched this happen. I've had a front row seat and I've been very observant and seen of watching this happen. So we're not at a place where we have all of this packaging. In fact, I have to tell you this. We had very little plastic until the bottle bill. But the way the bottle bill was written, it required that you return that bottle unbroken. So if they had to take a very heavy bottle and they had to take it back, and it had to be unbroken to get my deposit back, what am I going to make it of to make sure it doesn't break and doesn't weigh very much? Until that happened, there was no market for plastic containers. They were out there and they were being marketed, but manufacturers didn't want them because it required them to retool. But once we passed the bottle bill and we had to take the bottles back by law, it created the financing that created the foundation that then went after everything. We went, a number of us recycling coordinators went into New York and we talked to the NRDC and we said, listen, what's going to happen is we're going to have nothing but plastic. We can see what's going to happen here. We are going to, first we're going to get the bottles and cans and they're going to go after everything. And what we were told was, you know what? We understand, but we can win this. So we'll deal with that problem later. Later is now. Later is now. That's what we are dealing with right now. The idea that we are going to take the people who make the containers and make them responsible by giving them the responsibility and all the money that accounts is absurd. Certainly, so we have heard the story of the scorpion and the frog. For those who haven't heard the story of the scorpion and frog, let me remind you. Scorpion and the frog are on the side of the lake. Scorpion says to the frog, climb up on my back, take me across the lake. The frog says, no way, you'll sting me and I'll die. And the scorpion says, well, wait a minute, let's think about this for a minute. If I sting you in the middle of the lake, we're both going to drown. Frog thought about it for a minute and says, okay, get on. Halfway across the lake, scorpion stings the frog. Frog says, well, why'd you do that? We're both going to drown. And the scorpion says, I don't know. I guess it's just in my nature. It is the nature of big companies to look for what is the most profitable. For anyone to think that we can give the industry a multi-billion-dollar industry of waste and they're going to become efficient is fooling themselves. They are going to do what they can to figure out how to make that business just like the rest of their business. And once we give them this, we will never get it back. Right now is the time to stop this. We do not need this bill. We don't need this bill. It is, as Neil said, stimulating a lot of great conversation out there about how we can address the problem. And that's a good thing. This has been a great process for all of us because We've been preaching this forever. Those of us that have been doing recycling and deal with this, we've been preaching this forever, but now people are hearing it. So there are solutions here. And it is about, hey, you know, banning is not the right way to go. People pick the packaging based on its expense. So make it very expensive. It's like the comedian when he says, forget gun control, I'm going to have bullet control. If I have $1,000 bullets, you're going to be real careful who you put that bullet in. Okay. And we need the same thing here. We don't need to ban the plastic. Make it what it costs. Make it expensive. And the manufacturers will pick the item that's the least expensive, which should be the ones that are recoverable, recyclable, and reusable. Everything else should be too expensive. If you make it more expensive, we can get there in a hurry. And that is called, let's just tax it and let's use the money to pay the cost. And hey, if we're going to create a fund, because I can tell you, I'm in the city of Philadelphia. I helped organize the program here. And I'm fighting all the time with the waste department in the city to do the right thing, and they just won't. But guess what? If someone said to them, you know what, we're going to give you a check for what it cost you to run your program, but only if you meet our guidelines. I guarantee you they will meet those guidelines. Why? Because they want the money to run their programs. So, you know, however we may feel about it, we grew up in a capitalist country. We are oriented that way. Let's learn to play a little bit of jujitsu and use that capitalism as a tool to flip the people to do what it is that we want.
Oh, wow. Y'all are, thank you so very, very much for that. Got a lot going on over here. That was really useful information. Does anybody have any questions if they want to come off the mic to ask and engage at this moment? Is there anybody? I know there's one in the chat. I know Victor asked about a good source for the history of bottle and container waste.
Okay. I'll tell you what, I read a report by New York PIRG in 1985. I don't even know if you can still find it. It was a report they wrote that all that history I gave you. In fact, I was sitting in the city of Newark reading this report and reading about the Kruger Brewery and looked up out the window and realized the remnants of the brewery were outside the window on the hill, you know, because Kruger went out of business, because old man Kruger refused to go national. He insisted on staying local, and Anheuser beat him out, and they closed and they died as a company. So a lot of this history that I'm giving you is what I read and I got, but I have to believe that somewhere out there are copies of that report. It was a paperback. It was before computers, so you're not going to find it on a disc someplace.
That
It
was
was
New
a
York.
report by the Public Interest Research Group of New York. It would have been published sometime in the early 80s, is what I'm guessing. And unfortunately, my first boss, Frank Sudol, it was part of his collection. And Frank hasn't been with us now for probably 20 years. But he was a huge bottle bill advocate. And he challenged me when I was in Newark. He said, Maurice, because we were, as recycling coordinators, we were a little perplexed because we said, they're going to write this bill, they're going to have a bottle bill, and they're going to create a parallel construction, a recovery system that they don't have because they're going to have to build that. And it's the exact same one we need for municipal. So he challenged me, said, if you're a municipal official, your job is going to be to make it work. So write me a bill that will make it work. And we wrote a bill that in New Jersey that was adopted in California, where instead of giving the unredeemed deposits back to the beer companies, we said you should keep them, because quite frankly, those are that's public dollars that people decided they bought the bottle, didn't want it back. So now it's going to be litter. So use those dollars. But let me tell you the thing about policy that we need to be really careful about. It's been my experience in the beginning of my career that every single policy that we wrote that was positive was eventually corrupted and turned around the other way. Not because it was a bad policy, but because the industry that we offended never sleeps. And our energy is once we passed a bill to go on to the next thing, and they keep on working on turning it upside down. A whole lot of these bills where there's unredeemed deposits, the industry has somehow figured out how to get them back, that somehow they deserve the unredeemed deposits. And some beer companies consider unredeemed deposits to be a profit center. Neil, maybe you know more about that than I do.
Yeah, first of all, I want to congratulate New York State because I don't know the dates. Perhaps Rhonda may know. New York State, the companies kept the unredeemed deposits till I think about 15 or 20 years ago when the law was changed, and now the unredeemed money, it goes to the government. But this is happening across the country. First of all, a state like New York or California, we're talking about 150, $200 million a year in unredeemed deposits. And in California, Hawaii, and other places, they're trying to, quote unquote, privatize the bottle bill, meaning Coke says, okay, we'll have a bottle bill, but we control it and we keep the unredeemed deposits. They've done that in Oregon. They've done that in Connecticut in a classic corporate way. They had a bill, a bottle bill, expanded, excellent. 11:59 before the bill goes out, the lobbyists go there and they make it a private bill. Now the corporations control that. So as Maurice said, passing the bill is the first step, big step. And then you, what is it? Eternal vigilance is the cost of democracy.
In fact, I would ask, where is that $200 to $300 million going right now? Because those are the dimes that people are not taking back. What's happening to that money? That money should be used at a minimum to deal with litter, at a minimum to deal with litter, because that's what's being created when those bottles don't come back. So where is that money right now?
Yeah, there's one. Oh, I'm sorry, Maurice.
No, go ahead.
There's one other interesting thing that's happening, and I learned this from New York's folks in Maggie Clark, among others, in the New York City SWAB system, and that is people are fear that the EPR, first in New York, which has been, it's not a problem anymore, but there was a fear that EPR will take the place of bottle bills, which would be a disaster. And in fact, thanks to USA, Zero Waste USA and NRC, the federal EPR bill have removed the bottle bill from the EPR bill. And now there's an independent national EPR bill. And that's good, because if it were under EPR, what would happen is the same thing that's happening in British Columbia. The companies realize that they make more money in recycling material as opposed to avoiding it by having a bottle bill, and they're undermining the bottle bill there. So I'm glad New York State, people in New York State have been on it, and to protect the New York bottle bill, which is a good bill, from any EPR establishment.
We must have another question out there. Yes.
So for me personally, I think when I first heard about EPR, that was literally my reaction. Everybody was like really excited about it. I was like, I'm concerned. So really, with the way that it looks in New York, ideally we don't want it to pass, but it feels like it's going to pass. It just seems like we have to just figure out how to get it amended. It doesn't seem like this is a bill that's gonna die. So my question, oh no, will it die? We can kill it.
I'm going to have to talk to Rhonda because I don't know New York politics at all. Rhonda, could you respond?
I mean, there was an article in Waste Dive which said that even though it's got a lot of co-sponsors, that it doesn't look like it's they have doubts about its passage. I have to read the article. I can find it and share it with everybody.
Yeah,
I think we should make any assumptions about what's going to happen. You need to fight if it's going to pass. But I think this bill is so complicated and it's got so many landmines in it that, when it comes down to actually trying to describe and defend the bill, I think you're going to run into one another. I would make no assumptions. I think if you look at this bill, like what happened to the national bill, there may be pieces of this bill that make sense rewritten. And you might want to look at it from that perspective as the arguments go on, to talk about pulling out the pieces that make sense. But again, I attempted to read this bill, and it's a brain tease.
In fact, there are two excellent precedents from 2021. One is California, the other is Washington. And it was exactly, they put together an excellent recycling bill in both states. They had minimum content in it, bottle bill, expansion, all kinds of good things. But they also had EPR with corporate control. And in both cases, the bill was supposed to pass, but didn't. And when they interviewed people, the legislators backed off because they feared giving all this control to the corporations. So in both California and Washington, a good recycling bill was lost because people feared EPR. And I believe the same thing is happening at the federal level, where people are backing off of control, producer control over EPR. And also, as I said before, there are so many good things coming out of states and federal level that literally make EPR a second thought. So I do think it can, again, I am a neophyte when it comes to lobbying and that stuff, but my sense is that the best thing to do would be kill this bill and put together a coalition to put together a great recycling bill for next year.
Okay.
I would, the New York State zero waste bill for next year, and fight to kill this one. Amending it is so difficult.
Yeah.
You gotta sit and talk to these people. I would advise starting over for next year. But then again, it's been 50 years since I lived in New York State, so I should keep quiet.
Victor and then Jody.
Yeah, I guess I was curious if there was a way to access a list of those co-sponsors, because it'd be interesting to see who overlaps in co-sponsoring the bill that we don't want, but also overlaps of co-sponsoring the CCIA. Because if there is an overlap, then we have those connects, and we could potentially try to talk ones that we have close relationships to out of that co-sponsorship.
Yes.
I'll find them and I'll put a link in it's available online. I'll put a link in.
That was, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Victor, I was just gonna say, I was just looking at the bill myself, and like Biaggi is on there, Gustavo Rivera, Lou. We have a lot of New York City senators are co-sponsoring it. So I think that could be a good tactic, is to see if we're in anyone's district and target them.
Every time I look at bills and they tell me this is the answer, I always want to know what the question was. What, I know this is a solution, but what's the problem that we're looking for? And then you discover, well, you're asking, you're trying, you've got it. Now that I know what the problem is, why do you have all of this? I think for politicians, the best bill is one that everyone loves and it changes nothing. And I think, we need to dig into this. There are some good pieces of this bill, and there are some that are bad. I suspect for everyone who's supporting this bill, you can probably find something in this bill that they're greatly would not like to see happen, that they'd be against it. And they will argue that that's what should be amended. A bill like this is so complicated, has so many parts that it can fall on its own weight, and I do legislative work. I work for Clean Water Action, so I have canvassers. There are none we don't have a chapter in New York, but we are the organization that originated the idea of knocking on doors, educating people and asking for money. Clean Water was the first organization that did that 50 years ago. And so I have a whole group of canvassers. We lobby all the time, and then we do education all the time too. And sometimes these bills, they can fall apart on their own weight, and you can help make them heavy. I think also what's happening across the country is a really good idea here. You can also look at this bill and talk about what's great, and that maybe we need to cut that out, talk about it, and maybe make that happen. So, this is a double-edged sword. There's opportunity here. I think it's a bad bill, the producer responsibility part in particular, but we need a lot of the other components, the minimum content as one, more support, for recycling, and for God's sake, for the education part of it. The reason why we have a problem with China was not because the markets went bad, it's because we didn't produce marketable material, and that was the whole issue there. And no city that I have worked with in my career, after the second year, they all end their education program. We need education for 2 generations, not 2 years, so I think this bill provides that opportunity if you look at it that way. So I encourage you to figure out how you can make lemonade out of this basket of lemons.
There's one other excellent feature of the federal bill, which I hope passes without EPR, and that is the focus on environmental and community justice. That was a breakthrough. And quite frankly, I think putting an environmental justice label on it was part of the sell to get the PROs to pass it. I think it was a smokescreen.
Yes,
Because
it
I've
was.
spoken to 10 or 15 environmental justice groups. They say they're for EPR. I ask them why. And when we talk about it, they realize there's nothing in particular about EPR that does anything for environmental justice. Whereas in the Breaking Free from Plastic bill, there is quite a lot about the need to consider environmental and social justice. And we don't want to lose that. So let's lose the EPR and keep the good things in the BFF breakthrough bill that's in Congress.
What you got, Jody?
So first of all, I've recently retired, and this is like old home now. I think I was part of Clean Water Action's Clean Water Act 25th anniversary lobbying in DC back in the 90s.
Oh my.
And give a big hug to Brenda for me. I actually helped ILSR start their
Thank you
master
so much.
composter program.
I will do
And
that. Thank you.
yeah, you'll see a picture of me in one of the reports on backyard bin sales. I'm wearing my faux leopard coat out in my apartment building's parking lot, composting in an earth machine.
Way to
So
go.
in the snow.
I'll talk to Brenda tomorrow.
Oh yeah, tell her I said hi.
Sure.
And so I part of it is I think I looked at the list, and Victor, you actually kind of brought up some of the things I wanted to ask about. Is Rhonda, since you might know better, how do you have any sense as to whether the support of this is what Neil just said, that people think it sounds good, but they actually didn't read the actual legislation?
I mean, that's the only thing we can figure. And that, you know, this, hopefully the hearing is what's going to sort of bring it to everybody's attention, because it'll be, you know, a lot of people like Neil, Maurice hopefully will testify, and Judith Enck is on board to testify. So people are really going to speak out against it. The specifics that are just not, you know, the PR, especially I think the PRO is the main thing.
Yeah.
We're working with a legislator in Pennsylvania who took a piece of this bill, and she suggested something she's calling the Municipal Waste Reimbursement Act.
Love it.
With the idea that this act is going to cover the cost of all municipalities' trash. Now think about marketing that as an idea, you know. And she was a marketing person in New York who has gone back home to Pennsylvania and become a legislator. So, but that's exactly how we use a bill like this. If we like the idea of getting somebody to pay the cost, then cut that out, give it the right name. And yeah, you've got, what municipal official would not like to see someone reimburse their municipality for the cost of waste disposal?
You know, at the federal level, a very
And
similar
recycling. Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
excuse me, a very similar thing is happening. The Sierra Club and some other organizations are pushing what they call the producer responsibility fee. It's
Right.
it's a tax, but they want it's a federal. It will be proposed at the federal level, and that money that comes from this fee will be dedicated only for job creation. So it's the same idea of taxing the industry, getting the money to make the proper investment, and not letting the industry determine what the proper investment should be because of their previous histories of disregarding safety and climate, etc.
I would like to give you all some hopeful news in all of this, okay? If one is looking at this and saying, oh my God, we're going against all the big companies, you need to understand that the companies know that the public does not like plastics. Understand that manufacturers are not the plastic industry. Plastics is made by companies. They create packaging, and then Madison Avenue markets the packaging to the manufacturers. What the manufacturers want is a package that will get you to buy their product. I like to say to people all the time, you know, When you buy a bottle of water in plastic, and I probably shouldn't have this, but good for demo purposes. What do you think costs more, the package or what's inside?
Always the package.
So if what you want is inside, why are you spending all your money buying the package? Okay.
Yep.
They are looking for a package that you will buy your product in. When they scan your product at the supermarket, that tells them, everyone who shops there, what they buy. What they order to put on the shelf is based on what is scanned. So every store is a watershed of customers that decides what's in that store. You want a micro planning project? Get people who go to that one store to decide they don't want all their products in those packages.
Can
Now,
I?
let
Sorry.
me just finish my point, Neil.
I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
They order from a warehouse. The warehouse has a multitude of products in it, including what you're going to buy. But if you go out and you decide you're going to target baby food and you want baby food in all recyclable packaging, if you don't, they'll put it up there. But if you don't buy it, they'll go right back to what sells because they put on the shelf what sells. So we don't think we have any control of this. And it's very subtle. All the trash we make happens at the point of purchase. Whatever you buy, everything you don't drink, eat, rub on something, or put in something is garbage. If you can go into a store and you can see that, you will shop differently, you will buy differently. And if you get together and go to the manager and tell them what you want, go online to find out what product is in. I get my soap, my laundry soap in a paper bottle. It's in a paper bottle. They're available. But if we're not buying them, they're not going to put it in that package.
And
So let me leave it at, I just.
because I know y'all have an engagement at 7:30, so it's
Do we?
7:29, so we
Oh,
don't
well,
want
look at
to,
that.
y'all got somewhere else to go.
I do. I want to go back to something that Victor said, and we talked about big business versus small business. For every one major corporation that wants this EPR, there are hundreds, appliance manufacturers,
Right.
woodworkers, small companies, tens of thousands of them that don't want this.
That was the point I wanted to make.
They
Thank
came
you.
out in Connecticut. We can get you documents showing that these many mid-sized companies do not like EPR. They don't trust the big corporations any more than we do.
Yeah.
Thank you. I do have to run. Thank you so much for introducing us to you folks in the Bronx. Love to talk to you anytime. And please visit our webpage and call if you have questions.
Yeah, I'd
And if
love to
you're
get
ever-
the research that you have.
Okay. If you're ever down in Philly, give me a call.
Good night, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you so much,
Bye now.
Neil.
Hi, thank you.
All right, y'all, we are officially done, have wrapped the meeting. We actually do have, hi, Victor. We actually do have, on February 2nd, we do have like a town hall with the other SWABs. So it's not really a town hall. It's like, yeah, it's like a hearing, but basically it's an opportunity. We wanted to have this so that you could learn a little bit more about EPR, so that you could show up and be present for that and kind of really voice your concerns, voice whatever the issues are. It will be virtual, it's about 3 hours, but it's like basically you'll have your time where you can kind of come in, give your testimony so we can record it. It's really for us to, like, for all of the boroughs in the city to collectively say, nah, right? Like, we're saying no, this is the issue, and we are collectively as all SWABs kind of taking a stance on what it is that is happening. So thank you so much, Lilibeth. And more details will go out, more official stuff once we have like the one pagers done and things, just to get you all registered and so that you can actually sign up for it. Thank you very much, Rhonda. Put it in the chat. I gotta make it clickable and gotta take it back. You know I'm from the Bronx and we from the Bronx, and so we gotta get these bars anytime, all time. So for those of y'all that are here, we have an environmental justice meeting this Friday at 1 p.m. And we are still building out the legislative and the outreach committees. So it's super important. I know that there's a couple of folks here that are just active, so we already know. Rhonda, you're in a different SWAB, so that's fine. But for Amiel, Eric, Catherine, and Diana, I'm not quite sure where you may find yourselves, but there are 3 committees where the work is actually happening. So if you're interested in a committee, just email bronxswab@gmail.com. And then this way we can get you tapped in and plugged in, because we have a plan this year to get to just do more on the ground work in a particular community board. We're gonna figure out what's the one community board we're gonna do more our on the ground work in. Doesn't mean that we won't go to the other places. It just means that there will be a focus so that we can make some noise and figure out what are some issues in that particular community board, and then really address those issues directly, correctly, and efficiently. So if nobody else has anything else to offer, thank y'all so much for being a part of this presentation. EPR is a bill. The CCI bill is still here. I know, Victor, we're gonna have a wrap around and come back to that to figure out what the next charge can be as a borough and in this space so that we can continue to organize. But thank y'all so much. And I'll leave the space for like 2 seconds if somebody want to say something before we close out.
Actually, there is something that's going to be happening in the CCIA very soon. I'll be sending out an email to lots of folks. Basically, we're doing what is essentially a Valentine's Day direct action. We're going to be giving folks templates, both digital if that's the easiest, and physical if they can, to sign Will You Be My Climate Champion Valentine's Day cards to Carl C. Hastings' office, and just try to flood them with as many of those messages as possible, and create a small media event on the 10th where we're going to be mailing out those postcards on film so that we can then try to get some local news footage on it, just to draw more and more attention to the speaker in relation to. So that email will be going out soon. So there'll be some folks being contacted. And if you guys can contact your contacts with the templates you provide, that'd be lovely.
Perfect. And that's really good because it's right before, right after actually, when we have this all SWAB hearing about the EPR. So it'll be great because for me, I'm kind of contrasting EPR with CCIA because I'm just kind of like, y'all looking at EPR, you should be looking at CCIA. So I think every time we're talking about EPR, it's a good opportunity to really kind of amplify the CCIA a little bit more, especially because the goal is to say like, okay, yes, the polluters will be taxed, but that the money and what is happening should be in the hands of the community. So I think even as a committee, as we navigate in the EJ committee, as we navigate like understanding what the CCIA looks like, even certain pieces of it of what we want to ask questions about, if there needs to be amendments or whatever. But I do think that when I think about EPR and CCIA is really, really where we should be putting our energy behind as a borough, in my opinion. So EPR, the hearing is going to be coming up February 2nd. So I think that's a good opportunity and a good prep before the Valentine's Day thing. So that's good. Good to know. So once you send that to me, I can make sure it goes out to our whole, email thread. Awesome. All right, y'all. Well, we are out of here unless anybody else got something to say. You got like 2 more seconds. We out of here. All right. All right, y'all. Have a good week and we will talk soon.
Good night.
Bye.